Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, we're going to react to the US Navy's unluckiest ship with an untouchable crew. Now, that's a bit of a, what's the word? Juxtaposition. Like, you know, if a crew's untouchable, you would think that a ship would, you know, you'd make its own luck. How would it be unlucky? Or maybe it was because maybe the ship just kept breaking down. There was constantly a problem with the ship, and maybe that led to the crew being in dangerous situations, like with enemy, but the crew were just so like badass that no matter what situation they were put in, they always came out on top.
Yes, the time the USS Iowa got a jacuzzi tub installed in it, and then like 2 days later, an American destroyer shot a torpedo at it.
What?
And today we're talking about the ship that shot that torpedo. Ladies and gentlemen, the unluckiest ship in U.S. naval history, the USS William D. Porter, unaffectionately nicknamed the Willie D. But first, a word from our sponsor, because this video is brought to you by me in a Quack Bang print Hawaiian shirt, because we have a bunch of new merch over at the merch store, and I just started a Patreon where I'm going to be posting all the deleted scenes from these videos and a bunch of other behind the scenes content. So if you wanted to check that out, it's all over at thefatelectrician.com. Head there after the video, which we're going to get back to right now. All right, important background info. The Willie D is a Fletcher-class destroyer. If you don't know, right after the attack on Pearl Harbor, America decided, hey, we need a bunch of more naval power if we want to fight this war. So they basically had two options of how to go about that. Option A, they could do what the Germans and the Japanese were doing by creating a couple of warships that were like really, really good, supposedly. You know, like they're going to have a bunch of armor and a bunch of firepower, and they're going to be unstoppable and huge and blah, 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 blah. Or option B, they could go with the tried and true American strategy of accuracy by volume. You can have one really big, really powerful warship, or you could have a shit ton of pretty good warships and just overwhelm the enemy with sheer numbers, okay? It's kind of like that decision that you make at 2 a.m. when you're drunk and you call Domino's and you're like, hey, can I get a large pizza? And the guy on the other end of the line is like, yeah, I can give you one large pizza, or hear me out, I can give you like 57 medium pizzas for the same price. America's picking the 57 medium pizzas every time. Okay, if you're not picking up what I'm putting down, the Fletcher-class destroyer is quite literally the Sherman tank of the ocean, okay? America built a ton of them. Which, you know, good, that's a great strategy.
So quick to make, not too complicated. You can get them out quickly.
The only problem with making a bunch of new warships, though, is that you're going to need a bunch of new sailors, and new sailors don't always have a ton of experience, and that is where the story really begins. So, once upon a time, July 6, 1943, the USS William D. Porter gets commissioned and put into service. We now have a brand new warship being crewed by presumably a bunch of rookies. And they're in need of their first mission. It's probably going to end up being something pretty easy, you know, where all the new guys can get their feet wet, get some experience, build their confidence up, something along those lines you would think, but no, absolutely not. We're going to go ahead and send them on a super duper top secret mission where they are going to help escort the USS Iowa across the Atlantic Ocean to North Africa. You know, the same Atlantic Ocean that in 1943 was infested with German U-boats that were sinking hundreds of ships.
Infested.
And just to be clear, this mission is so secretive that nobody even involved in the mission knows what's going on until it's already happening. This is like the Snoop Dogg or Willie Nelson of secret missions, okay? This is the highest level of secrecy that you can achieve. Why is it so secretive? Because on the USS Iowa is going to be FDR, the president, his entire Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Secretary of State. And they're all going over there so they can attend the Cairo and Tehran conferences where they're going to meet Stalin, Winston Churchill, Shanghai Shek, all the leaders of the different countries that are going to fight the Axis powers. And my favorite fact...
And obviously, if an enemy knew about all of those, you know, high-ranking American politicians on that one boat, they would just put all their efforts into sinking it.
The to this entire mission is that the crew of the USS Iowa had no idea that they were going to be escorting the president, but at the same time, they had to make certain accommodations for the president before he showed up, including installing a jacuzzi tub in his quarters. So for a period of time, there was a bunch of new sailors looking around like, why the fuck are we getting a jacuzzi tub installed on our battleship? This is awesome. And then like a week later, FDR shows up and the whole crew's like, oh, well, this makes way more sense now, because obviously FDR can't really shower. He's going to need a bathtub because, you know, he's got that water polo injury or whatever happened to him. Anyways, so the Willie D goes to leave port for the...
What water polo injury?
The very first time to meet up with the USS Iowa, and while backing up, they forgot to bring the anchor up all the way and proceeded to scrape the life rafts and a bunch of other equipment off of the destroyer next to it, and then they bumped into like 2 more destroyers just trying to get out of the harbor. So they set out.
You know, I've never seen any Austin Powers movies. Like, not one of them. Are they worth watching?
On the super secret mission escorting the president across the Atlantic, it's the USS Iowa being escorted by 3 destroyers, including the Willie D, and 2 escort carriers. Now, while they're traveling, they have to have complete silence to be as quiet as possible to not get detected by U-boats, and that includes not using the radio. Absolute radio silence. You have to communicate using signal lamps instead. So fast forward, we're like 24 hours into this 8-day-long mission. Everything is going great. Then suddenly they hit a rough patch of ocean, and the Willie D apparently didn't strap down all of their depth charges, and one of them just rolls off the ship into the water and fucking explodes. Okay, now the crew of the Willie D knows exactly what happened, but all the other ships have no idea, and all they know is that there was a huge explosion.
Oh god, do they think they're under attack, and do they all start blasting? Oh my god.
Underwater, near the boat that the president is on. Everything went from 0 to DEFCON holy shit like that. So they're thinking they're getting attacked by German U-boats. They break out into evasive maneuvers. Everybody's running to their battle stations, getting ready for a fight.
But don't they have radio at this point? Like, they could have quickly just said, accident, guys, no need for any escalation. Purely an accident.
And then the Willie D hops on the signal lamp and we're like, sorry, that was us. The whole radio silence thing actually comes in pretty clutch for the Willie D right here because since they can't talk on the radio, command has no idea of actually figuring out what happened. They're not going to know that somebody just forgot to ratchet strap down the depth charges. And they also can't get chewed out via signal lamps. So the whole conversation was pretty much just that. Hey, that was us. We're not getting attacked. The end for now. And since this is the first of 8 days on this voyage, there's a good chance that everybody's just gonna forget that this happened and we can all move on. Fast forward 2 days, we're now on the 3rd day of the 8-day voyage, and the USS Iowa goes full dog and pony show mode, and they decide they're gonna release a bunch of weather balloons to be able to shoot their anti-aircraft guns at to show off for the president. So they get all these weather balloons up in the air, and then they proceed to let them float all the way across the continental United States from Montana to the coast of South Carolina before they shoot them down with an F-22 Raptor. Wait, that's a fucking wrong story.
I was going to say, what? I think the F-22 didn't come into service for a couple of decades at very least. More than a couple decades.
Sorry, so the USS Iowa opens fire with their anti-aircraft guns. They're taking out all these weather balloons. FDR's super impressed, but then there's a huge gust of wind, and it blows a bunch of these weather balloons out of range and over towards the Willie D. At this point, the Willie D is like, oh shit, this is our chance to redeem ourselves. Quick, man those anti-aircraft guns. We got to take out these balloons. And that's exactly what they do. They start absolutely destroying these balloons. They popped every single one of them. They did a terrific job. So they pop all these balloons. The crew of the Willie D is just amped. They've totally redeemed themselves. Everybody's going to forget about that depth charge thing now. This is the best day ever. So the commander decides not wanting to lose.
You just know something's going to go wrong, don't you? Something is going to go
all
wrong.
Of his crew's motivation, they're also going to do some torpedo drills, keep boosting up their morale, you know? So when you do a torpedo drill, you send the torpedo guy down and he takes the primers out of the torpedoes in the torpedo tube so that when you fire the torpedo for the drill, it doesn't actually launch the torpedo. So the chief torpedo officer goes down, takes all the primers out of the torpedoes, gives a thumbs up that they're good to proceed with the exercise. The commander of the Willie D then picks a target. Now, bear in mind, he's trying to improve his men's confidence and morale, and what are you gonna do if you want them to score a hit? You're gonna aim for the biggest target, right? Give them the biggest opportunity to succeed that you can give them. So they aim at the USS Iowa, you know, the ship with the president on it. So the crew takes aim with the torpedo tubes. Commander gives the order, fire torpedo number 1. Click, torpedo stays in the tube, nothing happens. They wait a few minutes, they're like, oh hey, we scored an imaginary direct hit. Good for us, terrific. Commander gives the order again, fire torpedo number 2. Click, nothing happens, wait a few minutes. Oh hey, we scored another direct hit. Commander gives the order, fire torpedo number 3. Chief torpedo officer, fire fucking what now?
Oh god.
The Willie D has now just fired a live torpedo at the President of the United States, and they have anywhere between 3 and 5 minutes before that thing hits the USS Iowa. What do? Obviously, you radio over to the Iowa and say, you need to move right now. But we can't do that because we're under orders to maintain radio silence, remember? And if we break radio silence, some German U-boat might come out of nowhere and shoot a torpedo at the...
But weren't they using the lights to do like Morse code? Remember, like they were using the lights to do something. I'm guessing it was Morse code. Like I'd be flapping that thing. I'd be like,
president. So they decide they're not going to use the radio, which is like not calling the fire department when your house is on fire because they're going to show up and get shit wet. Like, sometimes you just have to fight fuck-ups with fuck-ups, okay? But whatever.
Yeah.
So they decide they're not going to use the radio. They're going to use the signal lamp instead. So this poor, what I presume to be an 18-year-old kid that was probably in high school 6 months ago, climbs up on this signal lamp, probably having the worst panic attack of his entire life, knowing full well that if he messes this up, he very well may be partially responsible for killing the longest sitting president, both literally and figuratively, in American history. And the panic attack is starting to get the best of him, because he's up there like, 1 if by land, 2 if by sea. How many fucking lanterns do I have to hang to signal, don't move, there's a torpedo coming at you? So the commander of the Willie D tells this kid, signal the Iowa, tell him there's a torpedo coming towards you. The kid sends a signal, the Iowa gets the signal, and it reads as, and I quote, there's a torpedo moving away from you. So now the Iowa's super confused. They signal back, they're like, what? So the commander of the Willie D tells this kid, fuck it, just signal the Iowa, tell him to back up. Kid sends a signal, the Iowa gets it, and it reads, and I quote, we're backing up, meaning the Willie D is backing up. So the Iowa's sitting there like, there's a torpedo moving away from us, and the Willie D is backing up. I think they're getting attacked by a submarine right now. So they signal back, where's the submarine? After hearing this, the commander of the Willie D finally comes to the realization that he would rather be the guy that broke radio silence than be the guy that killed the president of the United States. So he picks up the radio and calls over to the Iowa. He says,
plus, if you keep the radio call as short as possible, you know, that keeps the window in which an enemy can intercept the message limited. Just be like, move, 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 move. Like literally 1 second.
Something along the lines of Lion, which is the Iowa's code name. Emergency, torpedo in the water, turn right. The Iowa doesn't know who's talking to him, so they're like, say again, who is this? And he's like, it's the commander of the Willie D, fucking turn right or you're gonna get hit by a torpedo. So they bank right. At this point, all hell breaks loose on the USS Iowa because there's a torpedo coming towards them and they have the president on board. Everybody's running around like chickens with their heads cut off. At this point, FDR decides he's going to be a complete gangster, just straight up hold my blanket, orders his secret security guys to wheel him up to the railing because he wants to make eye contact with this torpedo as it shoots the USS Iowa. And in his own diary later on, he would go on to write about how he personally saw that torpedo miss by only 1,000 feet. So the torpedo missed, the crisis is averted, but the only problem is now...
Ballsy. Very ballsy, man. I'd be praying. I'd be like... Please, 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 let me go to heaven.
Willie D is the only ship that knows what actually happened, and all the other ships are still looking for a submarine that attacked the USS Iowa. So the Willie D has to radio over and is like, yeah, that was us. Sorry. At which point, the USS Iowa takes all 3 of her turrets, 9 16-inch guns, and turns them and points them at the Willie D. The Willie D is then ordered to leave the group, sail back to Bermuda by themselves, where they're going to get investigated because they just tried to kill the president. And what happened next is kind of debated. One story goes that the Marine Corps boarded the Willie D and arrested the entire crew, making it the first and only time in U.S. naval history that an entire crew got arrested. Some people think that that didn't happen because it wasn't in the Willie D's official war diary, but you also have to remember that this was already a super secret mission, and this was fucking embarrassing. I mean, the government didn't release this to the public until the late 1950s after World War II.
Wow. So it's classified for a long time, like well over a decade.
So it could have actually happened and the U.S. government covered it up because, you know, the U.S. government covers up all kinds of shit all the time. But what we do know for sure is that the chief torpedo men that failed to remove that 3rd torpedo primer got sentenced to 14 years of hard labor, or at least that was until FDR decided to be a complete gangster yet again, because apparently he found the entire almost assassination attempt thing funny. And decided to pardon him. So that was that.
14 years of hard labor, that seems a bit harsh. Like, it was a mistake, ultimately.
President stepped in, said it was fine. Now the Willie D got sent over to the Northern Pacific. They had to make their way through the Panama Canal, up the West Coast. Now they're operating off the coast of Alaska and around the Aleutian Islands. They're there for about a year and everything goes great. They do a bunch of training, they go on a couple missions doing anti-submarine work, they do some shore bombardments, everything goes according to plan and it's perfect. Then they finally get the word that since they're performing so well, they're going to get sent over to the actual Pacific theater and they're going to be fighting in the Philippines and eventually the Battle of Okinawa. Like, this is where the real fighting is going on, and these guys are pumped to be sent there. So just to reiterate, like, they've done their time, they've put a lot of hard work in, they're starting to redeem themselves, they're getting another shot, and they're about to leave the Northern Pacific. What do you think they do? They throw a party, obviously, break out the booze. We're going to have one big party before we actually go off to war. So they all get hammered, and somebody has the bright idea, you know what we need? Some fireworks. Load a round in one of the 5-inch guns, we're going to fire it. And that's exactly what they do. And sure enough...
Please just tell me it's not aimed at the president. Please, for the love of God.
That 5-inch shell makes its way to land, and not only does it hit land, it hits the military post that they were operating out of. And on that military post, it landed in the front yard of the commander's house while he was having a party full of all the other high-ranking officers. This is also another event that wasn't documented in the official war diary, so it clearly could not have happened. But, okay, I've said this once and I'll say it again. Just because something is not in the official log doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
It didn't
Anybody
happen.
that's been in the military or worked a blue-collar job knows that whenever anything goes wrong, the first thing you do is look at the highest-ranking person there and say, can we fix this without having to tell the boss? And that's exactly what happens 100% of the time. And in this particular case, the commander that had a shell land in his front yard had two choices. He could A, pull their orders to go to the Pacific so that he could launch an investigation and try to get people in trouble. That's going to take 2 years of his time and cause him a huge headache and a bunch of paperwork. Or he can just sweep it under the rug, pretend it didn't happen. Those guys already have orders to leave like this week, and they're just not going to be his problem anymore. What would you do in that situation? So the whole shooting a 5-inch naval gun into the commander's front yard deal gets swept under the rug, and the Willie D gets sent off to the Philippines to fight in the war. And unfortunately for the crew of the Willie D, absolutely no one has forgotten the fact that they shot a torpedo at the president, because every time the Willie D gets anywhere near another U.S. ship, they radio over and say, don't shoot, we're Republicans, you know, because FDR was a Democrat. But despite their past and despite being made fun of, they actually start kicking ass. They get put on anti-kamikaze duty and start doing a really good job. They shoot down a bunch of would-be kamikazes, they send a lot of radio transmissions.
Finally, some retribution, you know, they finally redeemed themselves. Come on, guys.
People know that kamikazes are inbound. They're really starting to turn it around. Fast forward to the Battle of Okinawa, one of the largest naval battles of World War II. I believe the largest amphibious landing in the Pacific theater during World War II. And yes, the battle where the Yamato gets sunk. Is that relevant to the story in any way whatsoever? Absolutely not, but I'm gonna bring up the Yamato being a coral reef every chance I get for the rest of my life. Sorry, Battle of Okinawa, Willie D is on anti-kamikaze duty, and sure enough, here comes a kamikaze. But unlike usual, it's not trying to fly past the Willie D to make it to the more valuable ships. No, this kamikaze is coming for them. Now, I've heard conflicting accounts as to what type of plane this kamikaze was. I've heard that it was either an Aichi-style dive bomber, commonly referred to as a VAL, or a Mitsubishi Zero. Now, I don't know why they call the dive bomber.
That is a cool looking plane. I love the red. It kind of reminds me of a Spitfire.
A VAL, but I believe they called the Mitsubishi a Zero because 0 was the numerical representation of how many times these planes made a successful landing on average. Either way, it's coming right for them, so they open fire with the anti-aircraft guns. They end up shooting the plane down right in front of them. The plane sinks underneath the water. The day is saved. Hooray. Or so they thought, because the kamikaze apparently hit the water at the angle it was diving at. It then sank below the water and continued to glide until it got underneath the Willie D and then blew up, breaking the back of the entire ship and causing it to sink over the course of the next 3 hours. The entire crew was forced to evacuate. Thankfully, all of them made it out okay. All right, now let's recap, because everybody refers to this story as the story of the Willie D, the U.S. Navy's unluckiest ship. And it is. It was crewed by young men from the very beginning and experienced mishap after mishap, and would ultimately meet its demise after getting blown up by a plane that was underwater that it had already shot down. If that's not unlucky, I don't know what is. However, I would also like to put forward that this has probably been the story of the US Navy's luckiest crew, because nobody else has done this much dumb shit and never had to face consequences for it. Leaving port for the first time, they backed into multiple other warships. Nobody cared. 24 hours into their first mission, they dropped a depth charge when they were supposed to be being quiet, and everybody seemingly forgot about it because it got overshadowed by the fact that they shot a torpedo at the President of the United States. Then, when they were about to face consequences for that, the President stepped in and pardoned them. Then, they went ahead and shot a 5-inch artillery shell into the front yard of a base commander's house while he was having a house party full of a bunch of other high-ranking military officials.
To be fair, they did get away with a lot, didn't they?
meaning that is now 2 almost accidental assassination attempts on high-ranking people in the span of a year, but that just got swept under the rug, no big deal. Then, when they finally get their shit together and start turning it around and being productive members of the military and start really kicking ass, what I can only describe as divine intervention steps in and blows up their entire ship with an underwater airplane that they had already shot down, and somehow all of them make it out completely okay. So in conclusion, I guess this has been the story of the unluckiest warship that was manned by the luckiest crew in U.S. naval history. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch over at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang, out.
What a story. I mean, yeah, to be fair, that crew got away with a lot. I'm trying to think if today such a crew, you know, did like for like the same things, you know, pretty much almost giving away the position of the president, almost taking out the president, all that kind of stuff. It would, yeah, there'd be severe penalties to pay, wouldn't there? But then again, most of it was entirely accidental, aside from the, you know, hitting other ships as they were like reversing and things like that. That's kind of like just bad, not doing your job well, really. But is that a punishable offense? I suppose it kind of is. You should be able to maneuver a ship, you know, if you've been put in charge of it. But then again, you could also argue it's a young crew. They've not really had much time in training because obviously they needed to get them out as quickly as possible. So yeah, you do have to have a lot of sympathy for them. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoy my videos, please help me out by liking and subscribing.